I've lived the story I'm about to tell you. I've heard this story from many of my clients, and so I'm going to describe for you a generic but not uncommon agency client. This person's, well, let's just call them Bob because everybody deserves a name, right? And Bob's been a producer for years. He knows everything there is about production. He's very creative. His clients love him. They're extremely loyal to him. Um, and he's a beast on show site, but everything before and after, he's just charming as he can be. You know, you're you're so important to the process. I can't do a show without you. He says all of the right things, and you sit down and you hammer out a good but fair budget. Not a lot of frills there. And yeah, remember that last time when he said, "Look, I'll make it up to you on the next job." Well, guess what? This isn't the next job. I'm going to make it up to you on the next job. So right now I need you to do this for me, but don't worry. We've been doing this together for a long time. I'll take care of you. And you believe Bob because, well, Bob's very believable and his customers believe him too. And Bob's good at what he does, including manipulating you. Now, when the project commences, everything's going on. Bob's meeting all the deadlines. He gets you that deposit check. Yeah, there's a little hiccup at the bank. That's all right. It'll get cleared up in a day or two. Don't worry, your money will be there. In the meantime, I need to add this other client meeting onto your schedule. It's this afternoon at 2:00. Please be on that call. And Bob's just chucking along. And, oh, I'm so sorry. There's been a little change here, but it doesn't really affect anything. We have to add this other meeting. And, oh, the client wants to add one more video. So put this other video on your list. We'll find the budget for it later. Don't change anything. It'll all come out on the wash. We'll just keep track of all of it. Everything goes along like this for the weeks and weeks building up to the show. And then all of a sudden, Captain Chaos shows up. And then you get Freak Out Bob. And Freak Out Bob has so many changes, and the client's asking for so many things, and the client is being so difficult, and we have to do all these things. We have to jump through all of these hoops, and we've got to change the lighting design. And remember that thing we talked about? That's included, isn't it? No. Well, it should have been included because we talked about it. So everything that he remembers is something that was included, even if at the time it said, no, we don't need that. Don't put it in the budget. And all of a sudden, he's throwing things out right and left, and you can't keep things straight. Bob's good. He knows that if he can create enough chaos and say, man, we just got to get this project done. It's down to the last minute, and you're saying, well, we have to hire extra people. So no, there's no budget for that. The guys you have will be just fine. That's enough. Well, we can't add another 30 moving lights without adding another person. It's like, yes, you can. It was in the original budget. We talked about this, and you're going through everything, and now you're throwing people at it, knowing that that's what it's going to take to make it work. But Bob knows he's not going to pay for it because he didn't agree to it. And you do the show. And then when the show is over, the client is happy. You jump through all the hoops. And then Bob lets into you and lets you know, here's where you let me down. Here's where you guys screwed up. I'm going to need to get some money back on this. My client is very upset. Wow. But Bob's loyal. He'll come back to you next time and he'll bring you another show.
Welcome to your weekly dose of uncommon sense, helpful insights, and tough love. I'm your host, Tom Stimson. The Intentional Success Podcast comes to you through the generous support of Mertz Crew.
Mertz Crew helps top AV companies book quality AV freelancers. Your choice, your rates. We handle contracts, insurance, and payments. You save time, cost, and reduce risk. Start today at mertzcrew.com.
Now on to the show.
Well, we've all had some crazy clients, haven't we, right? And are they chaotic clients? Are they unscrupulous? Or are they just better at being in control of the narrative than you are? And my guess is that every once in a while we do run into some unscrupulous people. But mostly what I've found is that there are people who are very much better at being control freaks than we are at being control freaks. And so that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about, what it takes to win the battle for control of a project where you're supposed to be in control in spite of the fact that you may have a Bob-like client. And we're afraid of Bob's because, oh my God, he won't hire us again. Well, guess what? Nobody else wants to work with Bob. He's going to hire you again. So you got nothing to lose by exerting a little bit of control. But Bob's the exception, right? He's the outlier. Not everybody is Captain Chaos. Not everybody is doing this as part of their methodology to get more for less money. Some people are just chaotic because they're insecure. They don't know what they're doing. They're panicking. They're freaking out. And we have to know how to help them. And the way we help them is maintain control of the project through all the ups and downs. Now, to do this, we got to stop thinking like a rental company, because Captain Chaos, the Bobs of the world, know full well that when you write a rental order and you put all those parts and pieces and lists in there and you itemize something as 0 because you're trying not to show all the pricing, 0 means free, which means he can have more of it. Okay. That's the Bob. That's the person that we're dealing with. So Bob likes rental companies and he likes rental think because he can manipulate that, because in your rental order that you put together is a lot of value add. Oh, don't worry. We don't charge for project management. Oh, yes, of course, Mark is going to be on your show. Yes, Angie will be the video director like she always is, right? Even though Angie raised your rates on you by 30% just for having to work with Bob, but you can't charge anymore for her, right? So we know that these things can happen in a project. Now, if we are better at writing projects, we can eliminate a lot of these things. So if you're thinking that you're renting gear and sending and adding people to it, you've already lost the project battle, because that's not how project sales work. Pre-production is huge. It's a separate billable expense. When you give up that or downplay it as a value add, you're going to give up power and control of the outcomes to someone else, very often the buyer, who may or may not be qualified or working in your best interest. And when you sell on price, you will find out the job was never about price. The job was always about control. And the concessions you made to get to the price were often concessions over control. So when you sell rental, you cede control over the outcome. And rental buyers are, by definition, control buyers. They believe they are the expert, not you. And the sooner you can establish your position and put your expertise forward, the better chance you're going to have for a successful event where everybody wins. So we got to dish some rental baggage, right? 3 things that you need to change in your mindset to be effective at project sales. Okay, well, 1, forget everything about rental. That's 4, right? 3 things you need to do. 1 is you've got to learn to write a tight scope of work. A tight scope of work is not a list of equipment. Okay, you have got to treat changes as normal. There is no such thing as writing a proposal and then actually doing the same show that you wrote the proposal for. Between now and the event, it's going to change. Act like that's normal. Quit making a big deal out of it. And please don't let your control freak operations team get upset every time you add a screen and then take it out again and add it back in and take it out again, because this is normal. Treat changes as normal. And the 3rd thing you're going to have to do is learn how to control the narrative. And I want to tell you how to do that. So a tight scope of work, pretty simple. Tight scope of work says, here's what we will do. Here's what we won't do. Here's what the buyer is going to need to do. This is what happens when something needs to change. And you make it clear that you control the pace, right? You set a timeline and a scope of work. If the client or your team veers off of the scope, tapping the brakes is normal. You tap the brakes, stop the work maybe, and figure it out. So you have to have a tight scope of work that says, if we're off the scope of work, we are going to do something about it. And that is part of the scope of work. What happens when we veer off the path? So making change normal after this. In project sales, you set the rules for changes. Okay. Oh, if there's we always say, well, if there are change orders, we'll write the change orders. We have a difficult client, we try and get them to sign off on a change order. It's bigger than that. This is a project. Changes affect the outcome. It's not just about, oh, we want a brighter projector, though that may be it. Okay. Other things will change and all of that. So this is more than signatures. Deadlines and milestones that you write into your proposal, you write into your scope, are not going to stop changes, by the way, but they will affect how disruptive changes are. So our goal here is to reduce the disruption of changes by saying changes are normal, but here's what happens when a change happens. Okay. So we don't want to lose the grip in the chaos. We don't want Captain Chaos to take over. So we don't want that Bob to control the narrative. We're going to control the narrative. Be ready to stop work. When chaos presents itself and we have conflicting information, stop work. Okay. Now, this may be a metaphorical stop work, but you may insist on a meeting with the client saying, hey, I need to have a conversation with you by end of the day. These things I'm putting on hold until I talk to you. We're pushing back the deadline for the client review of content at least 24 hours after I talk to you. Okay. All of a sudden, the ball's in their court. You're controlling the narrative. Now, very often they do that to you, but you have to do it back, and it's got to be built into your scope. So if criteria are not being met, stop the work. If you didn't get the deliverables or the content pieces or the logo set or the revision or the approval from the client, you've got to stop work. Now, you have to have a speedy process for reconciling miscommunication. So who has authority to do that? In other words, you need a good production manager, executive producer, senior account executive on the project who can quickly jump in and fix these things and get things back on track. Now, deadlines, when you miss a deadline because of a change or you have to reset the deadline, whatever, you move deliverables, right? So if we're not meeting a deadline on something that's going to push everything forward, we have backwards to see how that looks on paper, and we'll talk about reviewing timelines in just a second. You need to look like a company that has this planned out so well, that has your production processes so tight that changes are going to affect multiple works in progress. In other words, there's 5 people on your team that are in the middle of something that is going to be affected by this change. And repeat that over and over again. I've got to stop work because I can't have 5 people moving in the wrong direction at the same time. So this is how you control the narrative, is make sure the customer understands how integrated your process response is. Because you are, in project sales, you are selling process, right? Did you know that? Are you telling people that? So now, in a project, there are multiple sub-projects, and each sub-project can have its own timeline. The big mistake I see a lot of folks make moving from the doing events in a rental mindset to doing events in a project mindset is they treat it all as one big project, and it's not. There are deliverables that have to happen, which makes it a sub-project that allows another sub-project to start working. So, for instance, if we don't finish the creative and technical concept design, we can't write a project scope, do a budget, or draft a timeline, right? So one of those has to happen. Creative and technical concept design is valuable, and you can charge for it. You may choose to not charge for it. You may choose to make it part of your relationship building, but you're not going to get a project scope, budget, timeline, or be able to work on anything until that's complete. Now, concept design is one thing. Production design is after the concept is approved. So we're moving from napkin drawings to technical drawings. We're moving from, renderings to actually fabrication, whether it is physical fabrication of scenic material or signs, or fabrication of content, media, graphics, animation, right? Creative and technical production design starts, and whenever we start a phase or a sub-project, we have to go do a timeline review, and we update the timeline based on what's changed since the last time we looked at the timeline. We need to do a Q to Q on the show. Now, this is simply walking through the elements of the show as we know them to make sure that we're taking care of everything. Q to Qs are a major way to catch mistakes and keep everybody on track and manage expectations. It doesn't take a long time. Okay, we only have to hit the highlights. I said, hey, we've got intro for the CEO. We roll the video. The CEO walks on stage. We do the ballyhoo keynote presentation. Okay, CEO recognizes somebody. They stand up. We acknowledge them in the audience. and we break for lunch, whatever it is. So you walk through the Q to Q, then you do a budget review, because in every time you do an updated timeline and a Q to Q, you're going to find things that might affect the budget. So make sure you review the budget. These are the things, the control points that you have with the customer that you can add whenever you need to in the timeline, as here's a place we have to stop, check, and regroup. Now, that takes care of the design phase, but then there's the technical planning phase. So as the design, fabrication, and implementation is going on, there's the technical planning that's going on. This also affects the timeline. So we do have to design the lighting system that we're going to send, not the lighting design that we're going to see, but the tools that it's going to take to do it. Audio system design, video system design. How are we going to lay people out in the room? Where is the control deck going to go? Where's Video Village going to be? Okay. This is going to update a timeline, which is really the timeline of prepping the order, getting it to the job site, loading it in, and being rehearsal ready. Let's update that timeline. Let's sit down with the client again and do a Q to Q based on those elements from the technical side. Okay. Did anything we talk about change the budget? Great. We're going to do a budget review. Yes, we didn't like the way this transition was going to work, so we're adding this element. It's going to add this cost. We are going to reduce another cost over here, but there is a budget change. Awesome. Everybody's got clear communication. You are controlling the narrative. Now, you get onto on-site. Now, you may have multiple additional review points through this process, but when we get on site, okay, yes, we're loading in the show, we're working towards our deadline, but in the meantime, your production team, your senior production team, your producer, your department heads are going to have to sit down with the client at some point during that day or day 3 or whatever it is, a reasonable time before rehearsals kick in, and update the timeline. Okay. Are we going to have rehearsals on time? Has the client added any rehearsals? What does the Q to Q look like? Let's walk through the Q to Q again. Well, we just found the speaker out that the speaker's not going to make it. So we're going to have this speaker and they have these requirements. That changes the Q to Q. Great. Does it affect the budget? No, we have no budget changes in all of this. Great. We're all on the same page. We'll see you at rehearsal. Right. Every time we have a chance to update the timeline, walk through the Q to Q again, review the budget, okay, we're going to have a better show. We're going to have more control, and Captain Chaos is not going to jump in. Now, on-site budget review is cumbersome. What we really do is, here are the change orders. Okay, I don't get to take anything off the budget at this point because we're in execution. We need to add 2 more downstage monitors. We'll get 2 more downstage monitors for you. It's going to be about a $2,000 change order. If that's approved, let's go ahead. That's all we have to talk about are the change orders. Now, when the job is over, okay, we have another scheduled budget review. Here's the budget when we left the shop at our last meeting. Here's the change orders from on site. And then here are the final numbers for this. And we'll process the final invoice from here. So again, your scope of work defines all of these things so that you can get this work done. Now, once you understand how the project process works, you are going to build a better budget. So your budget for the show is going to change. For every element of the show, you're going to have a baseline budget. This is the minimum required that cannot be reduced. You cannot reduce lighting below this, sound below this, video below this. You cannot reduce graphics below this. Everything comes with a baseline. This is the buy-in. If we light up this bit, it's going to cost at least this, and here's the minimum amount of scope that you will get for that. Now, enhancements are things that are variable that we can add to it. We can create more or less enhancements. We can dial enhancements up and down, but we need to make clear in the scope of work what is an enhancement and what is a baseline. And then in your budget is always a schedule, that timeline, okay? How do we set the timeline? How do we define the Q to Q process and the change order process or the budget updating process in our original budget? Because that is a parameter of the budget. This budget exists under these conditions that we follow this process. All right. Now, I recently did a webinar on a basic proposal template. It all fits right into this. It all fits very nicely on this. And for each project or sub-project within your project, you can have a scope of work, deadlines, and next steps. right? You can have options for each sub project and all of this. And then you can do a summary for each sub project. And then you can do a summary for the whole project together, showing how each sub project fits into the budget, right? It's way different than thinking like a rental company. It's much more effective. It will give you the power you need to make sure that everything is going to go well. It's a lot of art and a lot of science put together for a successful event. I hope you give it a try. Thanks for listening. You know where to find me if you have questions.
If you liked this episode of the Intentional Success Podcast, please leave a review and don't forget to like and subscribe. This podcast has been brought to you by the helpful folks at Mertz Crew.